Welcome to Life Empowers with Melissa Oden. Where there is life, there is hope. Where there is life, there's a place for love to grow, and love emboldens and strengthens. Where there is life, there's an opportunity to grow and be empowered. I'm living testament to that, and you are too. And if you don't yet feel like your life is testament to this, don't despair and don't stop listening to this podcast. This is exactly why I'm doing it. Thanks for joining me this week as we delve into so many life-affirming topics. Today's a great opportunity for you to get even better. So Claire, I just want to thank you for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Melissa.
Thank you. You know, it's interesting, right? I mean, we both have been sharing our stories for quite a long time. But I think there are certainly people out there who maybe don't know everything there is to know about you and your experience. So if you want to just start there, how did you get involved in pro-life ministry?
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my story. First and foremost, I live in Austin, Texas. I'm married to my husband, David, and we have 4 children together, and I grew up in a Christian home. My sister and I are both adopted, and so we always knew that there would be an opportunity to meet our birth mothers one day, or at least we hoped there would be, and we knew that we would be open to that if it came around, because we knew what a gift our birth mothers had given us in our family, in our life, and we wanted the opportunity to thank them. And so my sister had actually met her birth mother maybe a year before I met mine, and I saw how incredible that opportunity was for her. She was able to see who she looked like and who she acted like, and all these things, questions that you have as an adopted child. So many of those things were answered for her, and I thought, okay, this is really neat. And there is a woman, my birth mother, who did that for me. And yet at this point, I was 20 years old, and I had not thought much about my birth mother. I was so secure in who I was as an adopted child and my family. But I knew, like, okay, big picture, this woman gave me life. She gave me my family. And so I decided I wanted to meet my birth mother, knowing that a possibility I could find out something hard or something unexpected, but that was worth the risk because she deserved to hear thank you. And so I could have never imagined what I would find out when I met my birth mother. And so I met my birth mother when I was 21. Just a few months later, my adoption agency helped me find her. And we had this incredible reunion. I decided I wanted to continue my relationship with her. And so we set a second meeting up after our first one, just to continue to get to know each other. And this trip is what drastically changed my life. I was visiting her in Oklahoma, where she grew up, where she lives now, where I would have grown up if she had raised me. And I brought a gift for her, and I brought a card with the gift that said, "Thank you for choosing life for me." And I was so excited to give this to her. And I thought, okay, it's just going to be tears of joy, or she's going to really appreciate this because it was a ring and a necklace with my birthstone on it. And I wanted it to be a symbol to her of how grateful I was. And so when I gave this to her and she read the words in the card, she immediately broke down, and she began crying and shaking and sharing this story that I could have never imagined it. It's still, I know you can relate, it still is so hard for me to grasp what she told me that day. And what she told me was that my life was a miracle. She said that when she was 13 years old, she went to have an abortion after her mother told her that abortion was the best thing for them, given her age, given their circumstances, given that this had totally caught her family off guard of their little girl, 13 years old, being pregnant. And they told her that, this would solve her problem. It'd be a quick fix. And so my birth mother went in to have that abortion that day, and they confirmed that they had solved her problem. She went home, and she realized that things didn't seem right. Her belly was still growing. She still had morning sickness. She thought, I think I'm still pregnant. And so she went. Her mother took her back to the doctor, and they told her that day that she had been pregnant with twins, and that my twin was successfully aborted, but I had survived my birth mother's abortion. And she did her mother did take her to Kansas, out of state, to where an abortion at that gestational age, because now she was 6 months along in her pregnancy. Her first one was a late-term D&E abortion, around 5 months. But by 6 months, they couldn't do it in Oklahoma, a second abortion to successfully abort me. And so they went to Kansas. They said, oops, the amniotic sac that your baby that survived in is ripped. And so this is very dangerous for your life, for my birth mother's life. And so they sent her home. My birth mother was dropped off at an adoption agency after she was turned away for the second abortion. And she lived there. Her mother was not there through the end of her pregnancy. She stayed there at the adoption agency, and she delivered me a couple weeks later at 30 weeks. And I weighed 3 pounds, 2 ounces. My hip was dislocated. I had club feet. And my parents got the greatest phone call of their life, that there was a little girl available and available to adopt. And so they to trust God that this was the baby that God had for them, regardless of these complications, unbeknownst to them, due to being a twin. And so I was adopted into this incredible home. And so I was raised on love and grace and forgiveness. And knowing that my birth mother, regardless of what she had done, regardless of what she had experienced at the hands of an abortion clinic, regardless of what I had experienced because of her abortion, I knew that she was still good, because I knew that the hands that created her were good. And that God gave her this story, gave her me, gave me my family in this perfect sequence, so that when I sat face to face with my birth mother, I would respond in a way that gave her grace and forgiveness. And so in that moment, as I sat with my birth mother, I knew I forgave her. But the loudest thing in the room that day was not that I was missing my twin. It was not what happened to me. It was my birth mother's tears. And to this day, I struggle to describe what I saw that day, but it was the most horrific pain that you could ever imagine. And I knew, as I looked into her eyes, I knew that somebody needed to fight for her, that somebody needed to acknowledge her and her pain and what she had experienced, and how the doctors didn't acknowledge her or ask her what she wanted. So many things that I knew. My life, my story, maybe there's a purpose behind this, so that I can bring light to what is happening in our country when it comes to abortion. And so I was put in the right place at the right time, and I was given the opportunity to begin sharing my story about 8 months after I met my birth mother. And so far, given the response of what people are able to grasp from my story, I haven't looked back.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about that look in her eyes, right, Claire? I mean, I think I think some people can empathize, right? Or somehow somewhat understand what it's like to be in our shoes. But like you, I will never forget the first time I met Ruth, my birth mother. And, reflecting on it later, even with members of her family, they were saying, "What did you think? How did it go?" And, we had spent years communicating with one another. And I said, I will never forget the look in her eyes today.
Mm.
It was like a wounded animal, right? Of just, yeah, pure and utter devastation. And, I would suspect that you've probably been asked the same question that I have over the years. People would say, oh, well, like, can't her life just go on? Like, gosh, you're alive. I mean, isn't she just happy?
Yeah.
And what would you, I know what I say to that. How would you respond to that?
I heard my birth mother's story that day, and although it is unique, given the circumstances that our birth mothers, after the fact of an abortion, a unsuccessful abortion on our life, they have to look us in the eye. So that is different, but it still takes me to the same look that I see in people's faces all across the country. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of women who regret their abortion, and this is a crippling regret. Oftentimes, I've seen studies that show that women who have abortions, like our birth mothers, like the hundreds of thousands of women and families that we've been able to connect with all over the country, that their life almost halts. Their maturity level can often stay the same because the pain is so deep. And we know that to be true, just given any kind of trauma. Like, if you're traumatized as a child, if you're traumatized in a way that your life will never be the same, there is this ripple effect that goes over into every other area of your life, including 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the road. And I know that a lot of women that I talk to who have had abortions, that it's taken 10 to 20 years for them to actually revisit that experience and begin to heal from that past trauma. And so I don't. You might know more than I do. I'm sure you do, since you work with so many survivors. But I don't know the statistic on how quickly or if women who have had abortions whose babies actually survive, if they recover or revisit or heal from that experience quicker or the same or slower than a woman who has a successful abortion. Maybe you could speak to that, but I definitely feel like the pain that we saw in our birth mother's eyes is just really telling. It really speaks to the bigger picture of what is happening in our households, in our families, in the lives of women who experience abortion across the country. It is crippling. And that is why we do the work that we do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, what I always say to people is, kind of pretty point blank. The fact that any of us survive doesn't undo what was done to them, right? I
Right.
mean, we're kind of this panacea after the fact, which is a beautiful thing. And, certainly for some biological mothers like mine, that was really decades in coming to her. I think what made Tanya's experience a little bit different is she got to know that you survived. And, I hope that even though this has been an incredibly hard journey for her, she was able to live with that knowledge that ultimately she gave you life and placed you for adoption. And, certainly there's grief and loss that's associated with that. I would say for Ruth, my birth mother, it's just been, really delayed, like 30 years delayed. But it's been a beautiful thing, just like you've been able to see it with Tanya. I've been blessed to see this with Ruth is, now that she knows that I'm alive and she's loved and she's forgiven, she's, back to having a relationship with God, and she knows that she's loved and there's this sparkle in her eye. Yeah, but, your question's really interesting about, you know, for women with failed abortions who, have that surviving child, whether they raise them or place them for adoption, is there quicker healing or a deeper level of healing as opposed to women who, live with the unfortunate knowledge that their abortion was successful? I don't have an answer to that one, but it goes along with something that I've been, thinking about in terms of a research project that we're going to tackle at some point soon, I think. So, yeah, I love that.
Right. Yeah, and I think
Question.
what you just said, 30 years for Ruth. I do think that that holds true for Tanya, my birth mother, as well, because when I met her, I was 21, and I did start speaking out about it pretty quickly, and so I've been sharing my story for, I guess, 11 years now, and my birth mother wasn't receptive to really hearing what I had to say, watching anything about what I was saying about her experience, about my experience, until maybe a year and a half ago. And so if you add those two time frames up of when I met her at 21 and tack on the 10 years of me sharing my story, it was consistent with what you just said of 30 years, for her to finally be able to say, my birth daughter forgives me. She loves me. My God forgives me. He loves me. My slate can be wiped clean. My story can be um, redemptive, and this can be used for good. And so I do think that that's interesting that both of our birth mothers' experience is around the same 30-year time frame before they revisited that experience and began healing.
Yeah, and it's been really interesting for me because I'm really jumping into this different season of ministry, and I think you probably are in your life too. And we're going to talk about that before we close today. But I'm really kind of deep diving into healing ministries with some other organizations in the pro-life movement, like Surrendering the Secret and Support After Abortion. And one of the things we've been talking a lot about is, um, just how deep the generational pain of abortion really runs. And it's been so fascinating to me because the more I sit down and talk to these leaders in post-abortion healing, they've actually admitted, gosh, Melissa, for, the last 20 years in ministry, women would talk about their failed abortion and we had no idea what they were talking about.
Wow.
So obviously, and we know this to be true that, there are probably, tens of thousands of abortion survivors. Mm-hmm. And that means that we have tens of thousands of women and men. Now, whether they were raised, they raised their survivor or they placed them for adoption, I don't know. But it is certainly, I think, a new era that we're ushering in pro-life ministry to really look at failed abortions and not just how they affect survivors, but how they affect entire families.
Yeah.
And that, that's kind of another question that I had for you. I know how people respond to Ruth's story, and it's not always good, right? That's the painful part of sharing our stories, is that even within the pro-life movement, I think our birth mothers can be vilified sometimes. And I can't go in the comment section sometimes, right? Because I would just be beating back comments. But I know Ruth, unfortunately, has read them from time to time, and I always tell her to stay out of the comment section. But, knowing Tanya's story and having the great blessing to meet your birth mother before, and she's just beautiful. I know when people hear Tanya's story, they hear 13 years old and they have thoughts about that. how do you reply to that? What do you, how do you respond? Or what does Tanya have to say about that? Because I think even in the pro-life movement, there are some people who would say, 13 years old? How do you respond to that? It's
Yeah.
kind of one of those hard cases, right?
Yeah. I know that when I met my birth mother, she told me that no one in her life stood up for her. Not the doctors, not her mother, not her father, although he didn't know about this circumstance. Not anyone, not her teachers, not nobody stood up for her. And she said, yeah, I was told that this would fix my problem at 13 years old. I'm not ready to be a mother. I'm in eighth grade in school. I come from a less fortunate family. We can't maybe afford a child, all these things, all these reasons, circumstances that surround a decision for abortion. And she said, none of that mattered in that room that day when no one spoke to me. I mean, the doctor performed this abortion without asking her what her choice would have been. And she said that it wouldn't have been abortion if someone had just asked her, if someone had just encouraged her that she could do it, regardless of her circumstance. And I think that's the conversation that we need to have in our country is, do circumstances take away the pain of abortion? Do circumstances negate the humanity of that unborn baby? And if the answer to both of those things is no, I think that we can safely say that abortion hurts women regardless of circumstance, and abortion takes the life of a human being. As you can see when you look at the face of you, Melissa, when you look at my face, when you look at other people that we know who have survived abortions, that it's taking away a human being with great potential that was created in the image of God, to be born and to live out his will for their life. And so I think that I greatly and deeply empathize with circumstances that lead someone to contemplate abortion, but I think that the facts still stand. The facts that that the unborn child is a living human being with its own set of DNA. We can see that the humanity of the baby through ultrasound technology. And we've heard stories from abortion clinic workers that say that that baby is fully formed and real. And so I think we need to care. We need to empathize. We need to meet women where they're at, meet families where they're at, and provide solutions for them, but not solutions that take the life of a child, or leave someone like our birth mothers with that regret of an abortion, and with the possibility that their abortion might not be successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot lately too, right? Just how, when we talk about informed consent, right? And we know that the abortion industry hates informed consent, they hate regulations, right? All of those things. I think so often, if they would simply tell women, oh, by the way, this abortion might not be successful, you might have to come back a second time, right? Yeah. There is the possibility that this child could survive. I mean, they'd never say child, right? But even if they said, we might have to do this 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, I think that would change women's lives, don't you?
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen that with ultrasound technology. If abortion clinics, if abortion providers were really upfront with women and truthful and said, here's your baby, look at your baby on this ultrasound screen. When that happens, not usually inside of an abortion clinic, but when that happens inside of a pregnancy center, for instance, where women are given the opportunity to see their baby, we know that is a game changer, that they are able to put the humanity with their baby because they can see it visibly on the ultrasound screen. And so I think the same is here, that if abortion clinics, if Americans in general were really having truthful conversations about the science, what medical technology shows us, what personal experience has shown us as well, is that abortion hurts women. Abortion takes a human life. And there are so many things that we can look to that can change that conversation, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I was thinking before we got started today, and it's so fascinating to me because this next question that I have really bore out of a conversation I had just recently with a mom. She called the Abortion Survivors Network. She had had 4 past abortions, and the last abortion resulted in the birth of a twin, just like you.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought of you so much when I was talking to her because she was sharing the story of how, she had the first abortion, continued on with the pregnancy, and then found out that she was pregnant with twins and that she was leaking fluid and was at great risk of infection, right? So gave birth prematurely. I mean, sounded so much like what Tanya went through with you. And certainly I hear it. I mean, I've probably heard that set of circumstances, I mean, at least 20, 25 times for sure in my life with that, kind of scenario of didn't know it was twins, found out later still pregnant, leaking fluid, premature birth, right? And so, I see it happening pretty frequently. And I was curious with you, what your experience is talking to other people who are twins about how often this happens, or, is their story like yours?
Absolutely. I mean, I definitely know that my friend Josiah, well, both of our friend Josiah has said that they wonder if he had a twin. I've personally connected with a few others who either know or believe that they could have possibly been a twin. But with the twin aspect, what we know is that either twins are in the same sack or they're in separate sacks. And what I know with my specific situation is that I was in a separate sack from my twin. And so oftentimes looking at an ultrasound, you might see both twins, or one twin could be hidden behind another. And so that's one way that sometimes twins are missed at the beginning of pregnancy. What we also know is that from the experience and knowledge of former abortion clinic workers like Abby Johnson is that an ultrasound is only performed during in preparation for an abortion procedure, usually just to tell the gestational age of the baby so that they can quote a price on that abortion sale. Mm-hmm. And so oftentimes that can be easily missed. And we know that abortions are primarily performed without ultrasound technology. And so it's basically a blindfolded procedure. The doctor goes in, does his business, but isn't necessarily watching like in any other surgery where there's cameras and they're watching from the outside to make sure that no steps are missed. And so there's multiple ways that this can happen. And there are abortion doctors like Dr. Anthony Levantino who has explained this, and specifically on the twin survivor aspect, he has explained how this can happen in a clinic like his abortion clinic was all those years that he ran it, and that he performed late-term abortions inside of. And so all that to say, there are many survivors across this country. Every single one of us has a little bit different story. But what unites us is that we survived something that was meant to take our life. Abortion hurt us in a way that we could no longer sit on the sidelines and do nothing. And we've seen that the story of survivors, twins and single survivors. Is that what I call you? Not single.
A
Survivors
singleton,
and
yeah.
survivors. I don't know how to word that, but we've seen the impact that has on having a truthful conversation, a complete and full truthful conversation where we're hearing from the doctor inside the clinic through former abortion workers. We're hearing the conversation from men and women who have experienced abortion. And now we're hearing the perspective from that unborn child through abortion survivors like you and like me and like many others. And so I'm encouraged, I'm hopeful that as we continue the conversation, that lives will be changed and lives will be saved from abortion.
Yeah, and I think we are. I mean, of course, when we see the Amy Coney Barrett hearings, and I know you and I are both cheering her on, I totally know who I'm going to be when I grow up someday.
She's amazing. Yeah.
With the hearings and the election, I mean, even outside of that, I feel like we're feeling a momentum. Things are happening. And that leads me to my almost final question for you. But, what is it that you're working on currently that you would love for people to know about? What can they be watching for? And, how do they keep an eye on that? Where do they find you?
Oh, thank you. I would love to connect with anyone who is listening and maybe has shared a similar experience to us. I would love to be a support to you, as I know Melissa was and or would and is to many. You can find me on my website, claireculwell.com. Social media, I have a lot of events coming up. If you are looking for a speaker, I would be happy to share my story at your event. But the most exciting thing is that I have my book coming out in April of 2021. It's called Survivor. Be on the lookout for that, because I think that as we share more stories of people like us who have survived an abortion, that is another tool for them to start these conversations and hand a book out to someone in their family or in their community. So be on the lookout for that. I'm super excited. And yeah, I think that's it.
That's great. Okay. So I warned you, right? I would have one unscripted question for
Okay.
you, but I know you can handle it. What would you say to people, or what do you say to people when they say abortion empowers women?
Whew, well,
Where to start?
Gosh, I could say so much, but I think I go back to that look in my birth mother's eyes, and I have to ask people, how is that empowering women? When abortion is tearing apart families, tearing apart marriages, tearing apart bodies like mine, like my twins during the D&E dismemberment abortion that successfully took my twin from me, from my birth mother. How is that empowering women? But not only that, how is abortion empowering women like me, women like you? Abortion almost took our life. Abortion denied our choice. Abortion pushed us aside for someone else's gain. We were a sales pitch, and I know from my experience of talking to women across this country, from my experience with my birth mother, and from my experience as a survivor connected with incredible women like you, Melissa, I know that abortion does nothing more than end a life and tell a woman that she is not strong enough to have her baby and be successful. And we just know that that is simply not true.
Amen and amen. And that's why this podcast is called Life Empowers, because we know that that's the truth.
Exactly. Yep.
So thank you for living that truth. Thank you for being that truth. And, I hope people find you, and I hope people, wait as the months roll out for your book to come out. I'm excited for you.
Thank you, Melissa. I will say, throughout my experience in the pro-life movement, one of the most significant things for me has been connecting with people like you who get it and who really share a very similar story to mine. Because I thought, when I met my birth mother, I thought, this has got to be rare. I've got to be alone in this. But I'm not. And so I just want to thank you for your voice, for having me on, and just for really digging into this healing curriculum that you're working on with Surrendering the Secret and other organizations, because I know it is going to do incredible things for survivors like us who step out and say, guess what? That's my story too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining me this week on Life Empowers. I hope you found our time together to be life-affirming, hope-building, encouraging, informative. And remember, the next time someone states that abortion is empowering, you know better. Life empowers. See you again next week.